The sun was slowly setting. Our group circled around the crackling campfire, its flames dancing in the cool evening air. We were just a bunch of friends seeking a weekend escape, but little did we know that we were about to awaken something that had long been buried in the forest's depths. With marshmallows skewered on sticks, laughter echoed through the woods as we shared ghost stories, each tale growing more sinister than the last. But when it was my turn, I decided to delve into a local legend, the tale of the lurker. They say he was a hunter who went missing decades ago, his spirit bound to the woods, forever seeking vengeance on those who dared to trespass. As I recounted the chilling details, the fire flickered ominously, casting a ghastly glow on my friends' faces. Their expressions shifted from amusement to unease when I told them how he was said to stalk campers on moonless nights, leaving nothing but whispers in the wind. Just as I finished, a cold gust swept through the campsite, snuffing out our fire for a heartbeat before it reignited, the flames roaring back to life as if mocking our fear. Just a draft, Sarah quipped nervously, but I could see the worry in her eyes. We huddled closer to the fire, our laughter fading into silence, replaced by the sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, distant animal calls, and something else, something deeper, more sinister. Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the night, a sound that didn't belong to any creature we knew. It echoed through the trees, sending chills down my spine. We all froze, eyes wide, hearts racing, as shadows loomed at the edge of the clearing. "It's just the wind," Jake attempted to assure us, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his bravado. Then, without warning, the shadows darted forward, and a figure emerged, tall, gaunt, and draped in tattered clothes. The lurker. His eyes glimmered with a haunting light, a void that seemed to suck in the very essence of the night. We stumbled backward, our laughter replaced by raw panic as the creature raised a bony finger toward us, beckoning. "Run," I shouted, adrenaline surging through me as we bolted into the dark, the forest closing in around us. Branches clawed at our skin, and the chilling echoes of our own footsteps drowned out the sounds of the night. But as we fled, I could feel him behind us, his presence like a shadow lurking just out of sight. We reached the edge of the campsite, lungs burning, only to find that it had transformed. The tents were gone, the fire extinguished, and in its place stood an endless expanse of trees, a maze that seemed to stretch into infinity. It was as if we had crossed into another realm, one ruled by the lurker. Panic set in as we realized we were lost. Our frantic calls for each other were met with silence, and one by one, my friends disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the woods as if they had never existed. I could hear their screams echoing in my mind, but I knew I had to keep moving. Just when I thought I was alone, I felt his presence again, the chilling breath on my neck, the whispers of my friends warning me to run. I stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight breaking through the canopy, illuminating the ground littered with remnants of past campers' torn clothing, rusted gear, and bones scattered like discarded memories. In that moment, I understood the truth. The lurker didn't just hunt, he collected. And now I was to be his next prize. I turned to flee once more, but the darkness was alive, and it engulfed me, wrapping around me like a vice. I could hear him laughing, an echo that reverberated through the trees, drowning out my terror. As shadows closed in, I realized that I had become part of his legend, just another whisper in the woods, waiting for the next group of campers to come and share their stories by the fire. And so, dear listener, as you gather around your own campfire, remember this: some stories are meant to be told, while others are best left forgotten. Because the lurker is always watching, waiting for the next laugh to turn into a scream, the next tale to become reality. So enjoy your marshmallows, but don't let the darkness draw too close. You never know what might be lurking just beyond the firelight. The crackling of the campfire filled the air, casting flickering shadows on the faces of my friends gathered around it. We were nestled deep in the woods, a perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. As the night deepened, the chirping of crickets became a haunting symphony, the forest breathing around us. We decided it was the perfect time for a ghost story, and as the storyteller began, I felt a chill creep up my spine. "I heard this one from an old ranger," he said, his voice low, drawing us in. "There's a tale of a campsite not far from here, where campers heard whispers in the wind and laughter that echoed through the trees, but they soon found out it wasn't the kind of laughter you'd want to hear." I leaned in, intrigued, as he painted a picture of a group of friends who went camping, only to discover they weren't alone. As he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The wind rustled the leaves, creating a symphony of whispers that seemed to echo the story. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to the eerie ambience of the woods. But then, one of my friends, Sarah, let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, that's just a story, right?" That's when the wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the flames flickered wildly. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby, sending us all into a startled silence. "Probably just an animal," I said, but my voice wavered, betraying my unease. We resumed the story, but I could feel the tension thickening in the air. As the night wore on, our laughter turned nervous, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. We decided to tell one last story, a brave attempt to shake off the dread settling in our bones. I began to recount a tale of a creature that roamed the night, one that lured unsuspecting campers into the woods with its enchanting voice, never to return. Just as I reached the climax of my story, I heard a faint, melodic whisper drifting through the trees. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my heart racing. My friends nodded, wide-eyed, and we all strained to listen. The whisper grew louder, a sweet, chilling song that beckoned us. "Come play with us," it seemed to say. A chill ran down my spine, and I realized the storyteller's tale had come to life. We stood up, instinctively grouping together, scanning the darkness around us. The fire crackled and sputtered, casting long shadows as the whispers grew more insistent. "Let's get out of here," Sarah urged, but just as we turned to grab our things, we noticed the shadows weren't moving with us. They lingered, swirling at the edges of the firelight, and then, one by one, they began to take form, figures of campers, their eyes hollow, mouths twisted in eerie smiles. In that moment, the realization hit me like ice water: the stories were true. We were encircled by the lost souls of those who had heard the same whispers before us. Panic surged, and I grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the path we had come from. But the forest had other plans. The more we ran, the more the trees seemed to close in around us, branches snatching at our clothes, pulling us back. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of laughter echoing through the darkness. We stumbled, desperation fueling our flight as the figures began to close in, their laughs melding with the rustling leaves. "Keep running," I shouted, my breath coming in ragged gasps. We could see the faint light of our campsite ahead, but it felt like a mirage, the shadows reaching closer. Just when I thought all hope was lost, we burst through the encroaching darkness and into the firelight. The figures stopped at the edge of the glow, their expressions twisting from playful to furious. I could feel their eyes on us, and the laughter turned to screams of rage as we huddled together, the fire flickering desperately against the onslaught of darkness. In that moment, I knew we had awakened something ancient and malevolent. We had heard the tales, yet still, we were drawn into the woods. As the fire crackled, I wondered if we would ever leave this cursed spot, if our stories would one day join the whispers that haunted the night. And so, we remained there, clinging to each other as the shadows writhed, waiting for the sun to rise, hoping the dawn would bring salvation and not the fate of those who had come before us.
My friends and I gathered around the flickering campfire. The scent of roasting marshmallows mingled with the crisp night air, but an unsettling chill crept up my spine. You see, this wasn't just any campfire, it was a tradition, and with that tradition came a story, one that was whispered among campers for generations. "Have you heard about the old woodsman?" Sarah began, her voice low and conspiratorial. We leaned in closer, our faces illuminated by the firelight. "They say he roams these woods at night, searching for the lost souls of campers who dared to wander too far from the safety of their tents. He was once a kind-hearted man, but after his daughter disappeared in these very woods, rage consumed him. Now, he's nothing but a shadow. A wraith hunting for those who disturbed the peace of his forest." A shiver ran through me as I listened, the shadows dancing around the fire, like wraiths confirming her tale. I glanced at my friends, their faces a mixture of amusement and fear, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Just as Sarah finished her tale, a sudden rustling in the bushes behind us sent our hearts racing. "It's probably just a raccoon," Jake scoffed, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. We laughed nervously, trying to brush off the unease. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to close in on us, the trees becoming dark, twisted sentinels watching our every move. We decided to tell one more story, believing it would ease our minds. But as we began, the rustling grew louder, more insistent, as if something or someone was pushing through the underbrush. This time, there was no laughter. We exchanged panicked glances, our bravado evaporating into the night air. "Guys, let's just go back to the tents," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. Just as I stood to leave, a chilling howl echoed through the trees. cutting through the stillness like a knife. It was not the sound of a wolf or any animal I recognized. It was a mournful wail, the kind that sends a primal fear coursing through your veins. Suddenly, the fire flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and sway with a mind of their own. I felt a weight on my chest as though the very atmosphere thickened. A figure emerged from the shadows between the trees, a tall, gaunt man with wild hair and eyes that glimmered with a haunting light. The woodsman. Panic surged through me as I screamed, breaking the spell of terror that had gripped us all. We bolted, sprinting towards the tents, the sound of our rapid breaths mingling with the haunting wails behind us. I could hear the crunch of leaves beneath heavy footsteps, the woodsman chasing us, his anguished cries echoing in the night. We stumbled into our tents, breathless and terrified, but the feeling of safety was fleeting. As I lay there, clutching my sleeping bag, I heard it again, a soft tapping at the tent flap. My heart raced as I hesitated, unsure if it was the woodsman or just my imagination. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaking. There was silence, but then a low whisper came through the fabric, chilling me to the bone. "Help me." Find her. I realized then that the woodsman wasn't just a story to scare kids, he was real, and he was searching for someone he could never save. As the whispers grew louder, blending into the sound of the rustling leaves, I knew we had awakened a darkness that might never let us leave these woods. With dread pooling in my stomach, I knew one thing for certain: the campfire stories were never just stories. They were warnings, and we had ignored them. I could only pray that dawn would come before we became part of the tale, forever trapped in the haunting shadows of the forest.